I've lived in D.C. for 47 years. And in 1986, I created the Egypt, what is now the Egypt on the Potomac field trip, in which I identified here in Washington, D.C., architectural symbols that are directly related to similar architectural symbols in Kemet, in ancient Egypt. Symbols that refer to the history, the culture, the philosophy, the mythology of the oldest documented civilization on Earth. So it's clear to anybody with eyes to see that the most prominent African symbol in the United States of America is the so-called Washington Monument. I say so-called Washington Monument because that is what we've been socialized to believe it is, a monument that honors George Washington, first president of the United States. But that monument is not an obelisk. Obelisk is a Greek word. That monument is a tekhen. Tekhen is an African word that identifies the resurrection of Asar. Who was Asar? Asar was the founding father, the first president of Kemet, if you will, an African who was murdered by his brother, an African who was resurrected, and the symbol of his resurrection is the tekhen. So the tekhen then is the oldest symbol of resurrection known to mankind. It is a symbol that represents the resurrection of an African man, and inside of the so-called Washington Monument is a symbol above the elevator and plaque of George Washington that makes that direct cultural reference. So if you understand African symbols and the mythology associated with those African symbols, you can go anywhere in the world and reclaim your history and culture. So I have found the physical evidence to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the men who established the United States of America were literally attempting to recreate Egypt here on the Potomac River. Once you understand the backstory, once you understand our story, then you can decode these symbols. You can understand why they are here. You can understand what they represent. And more importantly, you know how to use these symbols in order to prepare yourself for the tasks that lie ahead. And lastly, the latest African symbol in DC is the exterior of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, right? That building consists of 3 inverted pyramids, which they refer to as the corona. And that corona is a stylized version of the caryatid in a Yoruba shrine. But in point of fact, these 3 inverted pyramids are symbolic of the 3 pyramids of Giza. The inverted pyramid is a symbolic representation of the womb, the feminine source of creation, and the National Museum of African American History and Culture is directly across the street from Asar's monument, which is a masculine symbol of procreation. And the angle of the corona on the exterior of the National Museum of African American History and Culture is an angle of 17 degrees. And that 17-degree angle perfectly matches the angle of the pyramidion on top of Asar's monument. So the British Ghanaian architect who designed that building with the understanding, as he stated in a newspaper interview, that Washington, D.C. is Karnak on the Potomac. So he knew that the Washington Monument is a replica of the Tekhenu at Karnak's temple, and the reflection of the monument in this reflection pool is a recreation of 2 standing Tekhenu, actually 3 Tekhenu, reflecting in the reflection pool in Karnak Temple. So for those who know that Egypt is here on the Potomac and that we have architectural symbols right here in the nation's capital that mirror that African connection. And so it tells me that, that it is a signature of our ancestors, that they are here, that if we understand that they are here, and if we align ourselves spiritually and mentally with their presence, then it means we then become the vessels to which they can work through. And by them working through us, guiding us and protecting us, that then lays the foundation for us to rebuild Africa right here in the United States of America. And so I've got a presentation that I'm working on that speaks to this rebuilding process, you know, from Waset, which is the capital of Kemet, to Wakanda, which is the hottest movie in the history of movies, to Washington, D.C. It's one straight line that is related to African history, African mythology, African culture, African symbolism that connects African people with African American people. And when we can reposition these pieces, these fragmented pieces together in a coherent manner, then they become the solution to the problems that plague African people, not just here in America, but all over the world.